Hi guys, welcome back to the Pageant Project. My guest for today is Morgan Murchland, who is a dedicated firefighter slash paramedic and most recently Miss Ohio for America 2024. After surviving a suicide attempt, Morgan made it her purpose to advocate for increased mental health support within the fire and EMS communities. As a second-generation first responder, she understands the unique pressures of the job and uses her platform to bring awareness, reduce stigma, and encourage other women in male-dominated career fields. Morgan is also the author of To You, a devotional book that details her experience with trauma, faith, and finding her purpose. Beyond the uniform and sash, she's a passionate runner and a self-professed crazy cat mom, which I've been talking to her briefly just before this, often spending downtime with her two cats, Louie and Peaches. Through every role she plays, on the job, on stage, and on the page, Morgan continues to prove that strength isn't the absence of struggle, but the decision to keep showing up in spite of it. And I will just tell you guys, we are going to be probably diving into some pretty heavy topics. Obviously, we've already mentioned suicide, so this is your chance to switch off. But Morgan, welcome to the show. Thanks for taking the time to chat with us.
Thank you for having me.
I've mentioned to you that I listened to your previous interview, and you discussed a lot of deep and heavy topics when it came to mental health. And I don't want to just rehash the exact same interview, but for people who are unaware of your story, do you want to try and give them like not the 30-second pageant overview, but give them an overview of what you went through, and how it led you to where you are today? Obviously, I know it's an involved story and we'll go into it, but give people the overview.
Yeah, so I started off as a firefighter paramedic really young. I entered the career field at 18. And so I was kind of thrown into this crazy life without really even being able to figure out how to be an adult, let alone an adult with a very intense job. And so I quickly ended up suffering from PTSD, depression, and anxiety, and then ultimately tried to take my life in 2021. And I had really this moment where I was kind of faced with the life that I had been trying to run from, and realized that it was up to me to make those changes and to make my life a life worthy of living. And I found my faith in God through that experience. And just confirmed for me that I have a purpose in my life. And that's actually how I ended up in pageantry, was just looking for a stage and a place that I can share my story as well as encourage others.
You give people an idea, give me an idea of what exactly it is your job entailed, because I don't think that, I mean, most people, if you work a desk job or doing what I do, where you get to talk to pageant girls all day, it's probably a lot less confronting than what you had to deal with. And then layer on top of that, that I assume, a very male dominated field,
Yes.
like to 95%. I don't know the exact numbers, but give people an idea of what exactly it was like in that career path of yours.
Yeah, so very intense all the time. So typically it's 24-hour shifts. You do 24 hours on, 48 off. And then at that time too, that I was really struggling, I was going through paramedic school. So I live in Ohio, and in the state of Ohio, most of us are cross-trained, meaning that fire and EMS is all kind of rolled into one job. So in order to kind of get that full-time position, you have to be a certified paramedic. So I was living a life where I'd work a 24-hour shift. I'd be up all night going on calls, medical calls, car accidents, just really intense things like that. And then I'd go straight into paramedic school. So I would have a 12-hour class day. And then the next day, I would have clinicals for paramedic school where I'd be in the hospital seeing that. And then it was repeat all over again, back to the firehouse for a 24-hour shift.
Okay. Did you know what you were getting yourself into when you chose the profession?
So that's a good question. Yes and no. So I grew up, both of my parents were police officers. And so I had kind of seen that first responder profession in them. And that's why I was initially attracted to it, is I saw just their passion for it and how they could help people. And I wanted that for myself. But the fire service is actually very different than law enforcement in a lot of ways. And the main one being because it is so male dominated. Now, law enforcement is obviously male dominated as well, but culturally, it's just a different beast to work in a firehouse. You're literally spending 24 hours, so a third of your life with these people. I was the only female at my station at the time. And I was at a department where, to be quite frank, they didn't want me there. They didn't like the idea of having a female there that they had to share space with, that they felt like they had to control what they talked about or how they acted when they were around me. And so that was really challenging. And that just added a whole nother layer to things. And to really the stress of the job was not feeling like I was a part of the team.
Okay, so both your parents were in law enforcement. Then you decided to go into the firefighting profession. I have huge respect for anyone who's in law enforcement, especially in America, where obviously guns are much more readily available than in Australia. In Australia, it's incredibly difficult to get even a handgun. And when I flew over to America a couple of months ago, at the head of the queue, I bumped into an American guy who was in the police, and he had been in the police in America, and now he was in police in Australia. He said in Australia it's a lot easier because
Oh,
that
I'm
side
sure.
of but I can't imagine what it's like to pull someone over and to not know what they have concealed, and just to be dealing with that on a daily basis. I'm just curious, when you told your parents that you were going to take after them, were they like, I'm sure, were they supportive, or did they kind of go, hang on, you're a girl, maybe don't do this? I'm just curious because obviously if you're a caring parent and you work in a profession where it's traumatic and dangerous, I got to think, it's like a bit hesitant.
Yeah. They were very proud of me, but absolutely they would have 100% chose a different career path for me. And especially now, it's just so much different than it was. My she's a police chief actually. And so
Wow.
she's been in law enforcement for over 30 years at this point. And it is a completely different profession today than it was 30 years ago. And it is so much more dangerous. And so I think a part of them was obviously concerned, but my mom always said she was a little bit relieved that I chose the firefighting side, because she thought it was going to be safer for me, which in certain aspects it is. You're not really dealing in those confrontational situations, but even herself, having been a female in law enforcement, and a female in law enforcement in the 80s when there was even less women, she is just floored by the things that I experienced as a female in the fire service. She was just completely shocked that she always says that culturally, the fire department is about 50 years behind the police department in terms of how they treat females.
I mean, I discuss, sexism and things like that, misogyny in pageantry, and that's one thing. But I mean, it's pretty exposed. Like in this day and age with social media anyway, if someone says something derogatory, it's probably going to come up somewhere on someone's
Right.
Instagram or TikTok, which I think is a good thing. I think we should be more transparent on the whole. But I got to ask, like, what was it like when you realized, oh crap, what have I gotten myself into? Because I got to imagine at the beginning you're going, I'm going to do this because I'm excited to save lives, to give back. But at some point, something must have flipped in your head. Maybe when you got in the firehouse or whatever it was, and you went, hang on, maybe I've bitten off more than I can chew, and these people, they don't want me here. Like, was there a moment like that?
Absolutely. It was incredibly isolating. I would say it really didn't take long, probably 4 or 5 months after I'd started, that I really started to suffer with my mental health. That's when things took a turn for the worse. And really, this feeling too of like, I'm trapped. I'm trapped in this profession. Like, this is what I chosen for my life. There's no second choice that I get. And I've made a huge mistake. So I absolutely had that moment. And it was really hard because when we talk about mental health and specifically mental health when it comes to first responders, a big part of that is having that like crew aspect,
Yeah.
having those brothers, quote unquote brothers, they call it the brotherhood in the fire service. And so I went into it with the expectation that I would be like a sister to them, that they
Yeah.
would protect me like family, take care of me like they take care of each other. And that just didn't happen. And that was really hard for me to come to terms with, that the people that were on my crew that I was responding to these really hard, challenging calls with just didn't have my back.
And can I ask maybe a silly question? Why is the fire department was slash is why is it behind the law enforcement? because I don't quite understand that because they're both dangerous professions. Um,
Mhm.
why is it in particular that you felt that they didn't have your back?
The fire service is really rooted in tradition. That's something that they kind of see. It's a job that's oftentimes passed down father to son.
Sure.
And there's kind of the mentality that like you have to, so you have 1 year where you're in probation, probationary year, and they're kind of stuck in this mindset of like I suffered through that, so therefore I have to make the next person suffer through that, and they really refuse to kind of see any other point of view. Whereas I think other professions like law enforcement have kind of gotten to the point like, hey, we're all in this together. That's doing nothing but tearing us down. So we might as well just work together as a team and learn how to support each other.
So is it almost like hazing rituals then?
Yes, and that's some of it, and there is some that are lighthearted and more fun, but
Yeah.
I never experienced that. Um, I was very much had very pointed aggression and harassment in a way where they truly wanted to make me, they wanted to break me, they wanted me to quit and to walk away from the fire department.
Why? I don't see. That's probably a silly question, but just
Yeah,
just as a
yeah,
human being, I don't
yeah.
understand. I mean, we talked about cats before we got on this call. To
Hmm.
give you a silly example, and I never understand how some people can abuse animals, right?
Right.
Torture animals, and I just feel like something must have broken in you as a human being to enjoy inflicting suffering
Hmm.
on another living being, whether it's a human or an animal. But why would they want to inflict suffering on you like that? I don't understand.
Right. And I think, I've seen this before, right? So I see it all the time. These young men, 18, 19 years old, going into this profession, and they're good people when they go
Yeah.
into it. And I think it's really hard for them when they're constantly around. It's like a mob mentality. They're constantly around this group that is pushing these really damaging ideals. And I think slowly but surely they don't see it in themselves, but they start to turn into that in order to survive that culture. And it really is unfortunate. And something that I wish like I could just like shake them and get them to wake up
Yeah.
and just see what
Yeah.
they're doing. But in the fire service, they have some of the highest alcoholism rates. They have the highest divorce rates. Infidelity runs rampant in those situations, and I think it because when they get in those group settings and they're like, hey, I'm cheating on my wife, it's completely fine. It starts to wear away. If you're not strong in your morals and who you are as a person before you go into that career, then that career will absolutely try to shape those.
I was going to ask if you have such dated sort of ideas when it comes to women, how on earth do you have a relationship of your own?
Right.
And I think you just pointed out that
Yeah.
maybe that's part of it. So just to backtrack, you said it was only 4 or 5 months before you really began to have the issues with your own mental health. Um, walk us through the progression from there. Was there any help that you could get? Were there any counselors or things like that? And then did you try bringing up your issues? And if so, what happened?
Yeah. So when things started to take a turn for the worse, I did reach out to people, and unfortunately, I was only 19 at this point. I was so
Wow.
young. And I look back and it's easy to see that and be like, oh my gosh, I was so dumb for making these decisions. But I truly didn't know better. And I did have, honestly, the wrong people that reached out to me to try to act like support. And really, it was just a self serving kind of thing to whether they had motivations for relationship, whatever it was, they definitely took advantage of the naive situation I was in. And obviously, that just made things worse for me. And I did actually reach out and speak up to my department and say, hey, I'm struggling. And this is really interesting because I think it's so important to highlight this. They wanted to send me to this retreat. That's for first responders for mental health. Seems like a great idea. Well, it's all catered towards men. It's all for men. It's all men that go to this. It's men that stay in these cabins and do this like wilderness retreat, and they didn't have any space available for a female, let alone a female whose trauma was related to what men had done to her.
Yeah.
So it's so unfortunate that a lot of the resources for first responders are geared towards men. And so that kind of leaves you as a female first responder struggling with your mental health kind of out of options. And that's honestly far from the truth because there are so many resources out there. I found a counselor that was great. That wasn't necessarily quote unquote a first responder counselor,
Mhm.
but she did an amazing job walking me through things. And but I believed the lie that there was nothing for me. There was no help available for me. And obviously that then kind of compiled until I had my suicide attempt.
I ask, how long ago was this, and has anything changed?
Yeah, so it was in 2021, and so much has changed. I always say I'm a completely different person than I was in 2021. A lot of that is because I found Christ after my suicide attempt, and my faith was a big part of what kind of built me back up. But it wasn't an immediate thing. I obviously had this suicide attempt, and I remember after my suicide attempt feeling grateful for my life. Like it really brought things into perspective. Like my parents just were devastated, absolutely devastated. And it was like it opened my eyes to seeing that I really did have people that support me. I didn't have the fire department, I didn't have my crew that supported me, but I had an entire family and village outside of that loved and supported me. But with that being said, I went right back into the fire service. I wasn't allowed like a break after my suicide attempt. I was still in the middle of paramedic school, so I had to go right back into paramedic school to be able to graduate. And so it was a struggle. It was a struggle for me for, I would say, honestly, probably another 2 years before I really got to a spot where I decided to step away from the fire service for an extended amount of time to just truly heal from what had happened to me, and to strengthen my faith and to strengthen just myself. And it was one of the best decisions I ever made. And now I can definitely say that I am not even anywhere close to being the woman that I was in 2021.
Is there any signs of change in terms of the fire department and their overall attitude? And also, I have a good friend over here in Australia whose father is in the fire. I think he was in the fire service, but specifically linked to airports here. And he's an amazing guy. And so,
Mhm.
there's always beacons of hope no matter how bleak it is. But I'm just curious. I don't know. Maybe there's a cultural difference between the fire department here and the fire department where you're at. But it sounds to me like I'm surprised an attitude like that, and this is horribly naive, an attitude like they had towards you can persist in the culture that we're in, because if a light got shone on it, I mean, they hopefully would have strips torn off of them. But is there any signs of cultural change in the area that you were working?
Yeah, so I think right now we're really in a transition period. I actually heard from another firefighter one of the best statements I've ever heard, and it was culture changes one retirement at a time in the fire service.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so we're getting there. And while the majority still has that mentality and are very toxic individuals, there's some really good ones out there. There's some really great men and women that are coming into this career that give me hope. And I wouldn't have been able to say that a year ago. I remember leaving the last fire department I was at, and I had sat down and had a conversation with the chiefs of that department. And I remember they just couldn't understand me because they're like, this culture that you talk about being so horrible is the culture that we love, is the culture that brought us into this profession. And I remember thinking, wow, I don't know if there's hope for this profession. But that's changed for me, thankfully. I've met some really amazing people who, honestly, the more that I share my story and the more that I'm vocal about things, there's so many more people out there who, unfortunately, have the same story as me. And that's why I think it's so important to just be authentic and vulnerable about what our experiences are, because that's the only way that will change.
And I think that's the case in many other fields as well. It's like when one person speaks up, they often think that, oh, I must be alone. No one else goes through what I'm going through. And then they speak up. And then so many people are just so thankful that at least one person spoke up. And then you get all the
Right.
DMs and like, oh my God, I was suffering with exactly the
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah.
And I thought I was the only one. Again, I can't what was it like when you're describing the culture that was so hateful towards you and you're trying to explain it to people and they love it? Like I
Yeah.
can't understand it, because if you were, for
Yeah.
example, a husband and you had a daughter,
Oh
I
yeah.
don't see how you could have a healthy relationship with any woman when you have such dated like conceptions about what a woman can and can't do. Like, am I missing? Like, what am I missing here? Because I really can't
Yeah.
understand it.
Yeah. And that's something I think it really is. If you're, and for me, my identity is so firmly tied to my faith and who God says I am. And so that's where my morals and convictions come from. But I think if you're not a strong individual, then it's a lot easier than people think for you to justify actions and behavior. You know, one of the things that I always said to men, and specifically men that had daughters, was I may not be your daughter, but I'm somebody's daughter and I deserve to be treated with respect. How would you want your daughter to be treated? And you know, a lot of them it like blew their minds. They just didn't they wouldn't make that connection. You know, they wouldn't make that connection that this is somebody's daughter because it was easier for them to villainize me you know, so that they wouldn't be the one that was kind of ostracized from the group.
I mean, you say villainize you, and like to me, it just look, tradition, whatever, but it just seems so cowardly for a bunch of men to be ganging up on a young woman. And I don't
Yeah.
understand, if you had a young daughter, how you could treat a young woman that way and then go home and not make the connection. It just seems
Right.
incredibly disconnected. And I guess, look,
Right.
a toxic culture is a toxic culture. When you did seek help, and forgive me, I don't remember the exact details of it, but I remember listening to your previous interview and you were going through some of the details about. I can't remember where you were exactly, but you were getting help and you were from certain professionals, and they were. I think you mentioned that you were being kept on just so they could make more money from you.
Yeah.
This is another
Yeah.
side I was hearing. I'm going, I think evil really exists. I don't know if you've had, you know,
Yeah.
when you have this, when you find your faith, a lot of the time, a lot of the questions that you battle with are like, are humans inherently good or
Yeah.
evil? And it's something that I go back and forth on. But from what you were
Hmm.
describing, I just feel like, yes, there is evil and it exists and it's very
Yeah.
real. But can you just go back through that in terms of, 'cause I can't believe that happened. It sounded
Yeah.
horrifying.
It was by far the most traumatizing, terrifying experience I have ever endured in my life. And it is so unfortunate that a lot of people are blinded to this, but the mental health resources in this country are absolutely terrible. And I see it now on the other side, working in a healthcare profession, just how neglected and exploited individuals are who are suffering with their mental health. So I had been after my suicide attempt, they put me on a hold, a psychiatric hold, which is standard. And unfortunately, the hospital that I was at wanted to transfer me out to a psychiatric hospital for me to be held in because they just, all of our hospitals are overburdened. So I was transferred out to this hospital, and I was told I was going to, you know, a great facility. And I remember them wheeling me in on the cot into this facility and immediately realizing that I was not where they had told me I was going. And I had ended up at a for profit psychiatric facility. And just the treatment that I endured was inhumane. I will never forget what I witnessed there, just the abuse. Um, and it's a loophole that people don't realize that once they legally put you on a psychiatric hold, then it's up to the discretion of provider when they can release that hold. Unfortunately, if you get in a situation where the provider is not a good person, who is in it for money, then they can keep you indefinitely until they decide to lift that hold. And so that's what happened to me. Is I ended up at a facility where they were going to charge me $5,000 a day for quote unquote mental health treatment that I didn't receive. And they had been keeping people there for weeks, neglecting them for weeks. There were people there who were hungry. I remember they barely gave any food. Like it was a piece of bread and some cheese that we would get for meals. And it was a horrible, horrible situation. And that's where I came to my faith, was because I had nothing else. They kept me from my family. I couldn't call for help on anyone. And so I called for help from God. And that's when I really found my faith. And thankfully, I have a family that loves me and fights for me. And they had to contact judges, lawyers, to get me out of this facility that I had unfortunately ended up in.
$5,000 a day.
Yeah.
How how is that justified?
So they had, they said that they were doing mental health treatment there, for people who are in crisis. Obviously, that wasn't true. Their mental health treatment would be they printed out worksheets for us and handed it out to us in the morning. I never, during my entire time after my suicide attempt, I never spoke to a therapist. I never spoke to any sort of counselor or psychiatrist. They would just mass medicate us. So they would give us all of us, just a regular kind of sedative to keep us calm, and that was it. And that was all that there was. And then for the duration of that, I sat in a room. And also what I found was that they would walk the line between what was legal and illegal. So they could check the list that, hey, we have like a separated male and female dorm. Well, it was separated by a hallway that was unlocked. So during the entire time, men and women were able to go, wherever there was, which was just terrifying. And further research, of course, once I got out, this facility had been shut down by the state many, many times, and they just always reopened underneath another name with the exact same staff.
Uh, I don't know where to begin, Morgan, because as someone who's been through mental health issues myself, that just sounds like a case study in how to do everything absolutely the wrong way.
Absolutely.
Probably even beginning from the top in terms of for profit. I I mean, profit is we need money to survive, but $5,000 a day, and then this facility being shut down multiple times,
Hmm.
and then being reopened under another name.
Yeah.
This sounds like a horrible joke. I mean,
Yeah.
what? So, from after your experience, were you able to tell that the reason they were doing this was strictly to make money off people such as yourself?
Absolutely. It was very evident to me. I'd never heard of anywhere charging $5,000 a
Mm.
day. And really, it became evident too. I remember just begging the people there, begging them, saying, like, please transfer me out to another facility. My family
Yeah.
will pay for the ambulance to come and transfer me out. And I remember that they just wouldn't do it. And that became really evident to me that they didn't care about my health. They didn't care about anything other than what they could charge me. And really, I mean, I'll never forget a poor woman who had no idea what this facility was. She was pregnant, and was suicidal. So she wanted to do the safe thing and sign herself into a facility, so she could be cared for. She had no idea what she had signed up for. And obviously, they were going to keep her there as long as they could to charge her. They didn't give her prenatals. Her teeth were falling out from lack of nutrients and vitamins because she was pregnant. And they were going to keep her there. She had been there for 3 weeks. And it just is, it's terrible. They did not care. I always say, like, that's the first time in my life I truly felt like I was not being treated like a human.
I wouldn't want anything to go through that, let alone a human. How
Yeah.
how did you manage to eventually get out or escape? I think escape is the right word because it sounds like a torture dungeon.
Mhm.
How did you eventually manage to get out?
So the persistence of my family was a big part of it. Obviously, they had spoke to lawyers, judges who knew of this facility and had before had to, write orders, that kind of thing, to get people out of this facility. And I think they realized at a certain point that I wasn't going to stop fighting and my parents weren't going to stop fighting. Obviously, they don't let family come and be there, because if family saw how their family members were being treated, they would break them out. And so my dad looked at one of the workers who told him that he couldn't come in the building, and he said, "All right, that's fine. I'm going to go plug my phone in my car and grab a bottle of water, and I'll just go stand here." And he stood in front of that door for hours. And he said, "I'm not going to leave here until I leave with my daughter." And so I think they got to a point where they just realized that my family was going to my family was not going to give up. And and this is how you also know that they weren't really concerned about my health. The nurse practitioner who was running this place just looked at me and said, "You know what? I'm done. I'm done dealing with you." Signed a form that ended my psychiatric hold. They dumped my stuff in front of me and told me to get out. And I walked out and went home with my dad.
I'm done dealing with you.
Yeah.
This is a mental health facility. You have
Yeah.
someone who tried to take their life, and your words to them are, "I'm done dealing with you."
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there, in your mind, is there any way that you could have compassion for people who treated you like that? I think it's way beyond myself. I do think at some point, at some level, everyone has a reason for doing what they do.
Mm-hmm.
But doing that is just so beyond the pale. I can't fathom it. Have you ever given thought to, and I understand you found your faith through that time, and maybe that's the silver lining to come from it, but to have to go through that to find, I mean, your faith must be very strong. If your faith is in proportion to the darkness you went through, yours must be biblically strong, pardon the pun. But can you at all understand how someone just gives up on human beings like that?
It's hard to fathom. And that's something when you brought up the question, like, is there evil? That's been one of the few times that I've been able to say without a doubt that that was evil for sure. And I remember as soon as I walked into that building, just feeling like this weight come down on me, and just my stomach turning and being like, this is not a good place. And so I've had to learn, I obviously struggled with anger after that because of what happened to me. And it's a journey. And I think it's a journey that most of us will spend our entire lives on when it comes to the things we've endured and having to forgive those things. Um, but I kind of rest my faith in the fact that, um, I don't think they know the harm that they are truly doing. And I do think that justice is part of my faith is rooted in the fact that I do believe justice comes to everybody at some point. Some of us get justice on this side of heaven, and others of us get justice on the other side. And I think there will definitely come a day when they realize that the harm that they've inflicted on just the lives of so many people, that facility still is running. It still takes hundreds of patients a month. That they will come to realize how truly terrible it is.
Yeah, I have a similar belief that, karma or justice will find you eventually. It's not my spot or my place necessarily to pursue the justice or to do the judgment. I leave that up to God. But I think it's quite scary when you think that no one really ever gets away with anything, because everything will eventually come back in some way. And the more you get away with stuff, the worse it's going to come back to you. And I do find solace in that. Anger. How did you feel when you escaped and your dad was waiting for you? What was that like?
There's nothing that could beat that feeling. And I always tell people, why I'm so vocal now about my faith, why I'm so vocal about my experience, is because you just can't live life the same after you experience something like that.
Yeah.
You're just forever changed, and I will forever be changed after what I experienced. And you don't even realize like how precious things are in life, until it's taken from you, until you don't know if you'll ever be able to hug your parents again. We had no There's no windows in this facility, so I spent days. They had no clocks, no windows. Lights were on 24/7, so I didn't see grass or anything. And so just seeing that again, um, and knowing that I was going to be able to continue with my life was truly just the greatest feeling. And it's been such a solid reminder for me that even on my worst days since then, um, it's allowed me to reflect on how blessed I truly am.
If you were to describe this facility and not tell people what you were describing, it would sound like a jail. It
Yeah,
would sound like a dungeon. So you've got all lights, not allowed to see outside, which anyone who's kept inside all the time
yeah,
is going to feel terrible. And you've got
yeah,
people coming in who already have mental health issues. You don't let them see
yeah.
their family, so you take away all connection. You don't let them see outside, so they lose all hope.
Mhm.
Whoa. I honestly, Morgan, I can't believe that a facility like that exists, number one, and number two, they're allowed to take money off of you.
Yeah, it's truly terrible, and it's something I have fought for, and will continue to fight for, is to put a stop um, to those facilities, because there are a couple that exist throughout the country, and it, and it's so sad because I think our healthcare in this country is it's been so overburdened that people have lost their humanity and their ability to empathize. People are just numbers at that point. And so they're willing to send their overflow patients to these facilities just to get them away, just to try and, lessen the load that they're feeling. And it's so broken. It's such a broken system.
Yeah. If there was some way of fixing it, I think that absolutely should be a top priority. Unfortunately, with politics being the way that it is, sometimes it just feels like
Hmm.
hoping for that is a bit naive. But still, I mean, you can't have a country where people's health is treated as a I don't think anyway treated as a profit thing. I don't. I
Yeah,
mean, obviously there's stuff we can all do for ourselves. I'm not saying that you should be allowed to eat yourself to death and then
right.
everyone should come and save you, but this is so far removed from that. And I can't think of a 5-star hotel that charges $5,000. So
Yeah,
someone is rolling in it, and I hope they get their comeuppance because they
yeah.
certainly deserve it. Let me ask you, in terms of the emotional journey that you went through, and I'm asking this as someone who I mentioned I was suicidal twice, and interviewed 10 women to write a book on mental health. Everything from domestic violence, where they were shot at by their partner at the time, women jumping off balconies just to get away after they've been beaten, bloody. And after you speak to people like that, I mean, my experience is nowhere near yours. So, I'm not comparing myself to you at all. But when you hear stories like that, it does make you, when you go outside, go, wow, no matter how bad it gets,
Yeah,
it ain't bad.
yeah,
It simply isn't. But
yeah.
you made the choice to go into the profession you did,
Hmm.
and then you ended up in this facility. I can't imagine what the emotions that you dealt with must have been like, because I got to imagine there must have been guilt, because like,
Hmm.
oh, I chose this and it's my fault.
Hmm.
Loneliness,
Hmm.
despair, anger. Can you just walk us through the emotions that you went through?
Yeah, I think, a lot of why the emotions were so amplified for me was because this profession had been something that had been my dream, my just absolute dream for years since I was a kid, since I was, little. And the death of that dream was really painful. It was really hard for me to come face to face with the reality that what I had envisioned for my life, like this happy, I'm living out my dream profession. I have this crew that they're all like big brothers to me, just wasn't going to happen. It just wasn't reality. And so that was a lot of it, was having to grieve. I felt like I had to grieve what the life I thought that I was going to live, and the life that I had wanted. And so that was a lot of it. And I dealt with so much part of why it was so hard for me, I dealt with so much trauma in such a condensed time. I was in a really toxic relationship during all of this. I, was dealing with sexual harassment from different angles from the fire department I was at. I had a paramedic instructor who, was harassing me when I was in paramedic school. So I just felt like I couldn't escape it. And so that led to a lot of just depression as well as anxiety too. I felt like I couldn't ever relax. I couldn't ever be, off guard because something else was going to happen.
How do you, and I don't want to assume, so I'll just ask, how do you maintain any semblance of hope or hope being hopeful after going through what you went through? Because I think that death of the dream thing,
Hmm.
and I'm not going to compare, a pageant girl's dream to what you went through, but very often, let's say a young girl will have a dream of being Miss USA or something like that, and then sometimes it doesn't end up the way they thought it would, and their dream goes from dream to nightmare, and it is very traumatizing because
Yeah.
growing up you probably had this idea in your head, oh, it's going to end up like this, and these people will have my back and I'll be saving people's lives, and then it turns into a nightmare in front of you and you feel probably, hang on, I was so naive for believing this. How do you not become deeply cynical after what you've been through, and how do you trust anyone, frankly?
Yeah. That's something that I've had to work through. And what I've come to terms with is bitterness is such a choice. And there are many times where I hate the word, but like triggered, right? If something happens that reminds me of the past, I have to choose. I have to choose to not let my past determine my future. And it's a choice. I have to choose to not let bitterness take a hold of my life and kind of derail me again. And one of the things that I always tell people, because it's so easy when you have a dream, like the fire service was my dream, to let it become who you are.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I'm not my profession. I'm not, my identity is not wrapped up in, my pageant title. I'm so much more than that. And that's really when I found the most health in my life, was when I built up my life outside of those things. You have to realize that you can be a full circle person, that it doesn't have to become your identity, because then when you lose those things or those things don't work out how you planned, it's crushing. But when you have, a support system, when you have friends that are outside of, whatever that field is. I have friends that aren't firefighters. I have friends that aren't pageant girls. It really helps you find balance in your life.
You mentioned that because one of the phrases that I coined, because I keep saying it again and again, is the best way to succeed in pageantry is to create amazing life outside of it.
Yes.
And I'll say that till I'm blue in the face, and so many people just don't get that. They think, oh, that's a cute phrase. It's like, no, you need to build up everything outside of it. Pageantry is a showcase for it.
Yes.
But God forbid it doesn't turn out the way that you think it should have, and then the dream becomes the nightmare. Can you? So the whole traumatic process that you went through helped lead you to your faith, or rediscovering it,
Yeah.
strengthening it. And I had this discussion the other day, and I feel like in self-help circles, we often want to say, oh, I'm enough. I can handle this myself. I'm always enough. I've been more than enough. And I don't know that's the case. And that's one of the reasons that led me to my faith is actually, no, you know what?
Hmm.
I'm not always enough. And I got to imagine going through what you went through, at some point you must have gone, this is a bit more than I can handle, God. So give me a helping hand here. That'd be great. So can I just ask, was that part of the process that led you to your faith? Was that feeling like, I can't handle this all myself. I'm going to need some help?
Absolutely. And that's something I wish, I could get everyone to realize, is that there is so much peace that's on the other side of surrender, of saying, this is too much for me. There's no way, and I always am blown away. Like, I don't know how people go through life without faith. Because I know for my life, there's no way that I could look at all the things that have happened or things that I could go through and be like, yeah, you know what, I can handle this. I can
Yeah.
handle this on my own. There's just no way. And so I found so much peace when I finally let go of trying to be my own savior, of trying to be the one to make my life work out, and being like, you know what, here you go. Here are all the pieces. Here's all my broken pieces. I'm going to give them away to you, God, so you can create something. And when I did that is when he started when he started to take those pieces, and he gave me new passions and new dreams. And there's so much peace on the other side of that surrender.
I, I thought it was interesting because my birthday was about a month ago, and on my pageant page anyway, I don't specifically talk about religion or faith or belief that much. But on my birthday, I thought I'd indulge myself, and I put up, my favorite my favorite Bible verses.
Yeah,
Beg your
yeah, I
pardon.
saw that.
Pageant. Yeah, and it was interesting because a lot of people enjoyed it, but there was one person specifically who shared my post and said, posts like this make me feel like I don't belong. Not everyone turned to the Bible for guidance, etc., etc. And I get all that. That's fine. Like,
Yeah.
practice what you preach.
Mhm.
But I thought it was interesting that this person mentioned that not everyone turned to the Bible for guidance. Yet they felt it necessary to take someone's post on their birthday, just discussing something they enjoyed. And I specifically said, and I'm not here to tell you I'm not here to tell you what to believe. I'm just sharing this on my birthday. Like, I crave your indulgence. And it's like, but I just thought, if you are so centered and you are enough, why did this set you off that you would share that? And so when you mentioned, okay, what was the journey in terms of your journey towards your faith, like, because I don't know if there was one moment and you went, you know what, I need help. Was it a gradual process? And like, how did you guide yourself towards it? Was it reading the Bible? Was it
Yeah.
praying?
Yeah, so it's so interesting. I grew up with a family of believers, but one of the things that I learned was that your family's faith won't save you. It's your own faith that you have to
Mm,
cultivate. And so when things got hard for me in life, I got angry. And I think that's a really common thing for people to get angry at God. If God's real, then why did this happen to me?
yeah,
And to be honest, I don't have the best answer for that. But what I can say is that, um, when you seek him, that's when I finally decided, hey, I can't do this on my own. I have to surrender some of this, is when I started to find him. And I think it can be hard sometimes to let your guard down enough for that to happen. But I always think of this as interesting. I don't even think we realize it sometimes. It's, a subconscious thing. But when I was really struggling with my mental health, I remember on several occasions kind of walking in my room, and I had like my childhood Bible that my parents had got me sitting on my nightstand. And I didn't want to open it when I was really struggling. And I think part of me knew that if I opened that Bible and I started reading, that I wouldn't feel depressed anymore. I wouldn't feel anxious. And I resisted it for so long. And finally, when I just decided that, hey, what I'm doing on my own isn't working for me, so what do I have to lose by trying this? Is really kind of when I found my faith again. Um, faith is a journey. It ebbs and flows. There's been seasons of my life where I felt stronger in my faith, and seasons where I haven't necessarily felt as close to God. But I think it's just letting yourself, you know, experience those things, just even if it doesn't work. Sometimes when you pray, you don't get immediate,
yeah.
peace or whatever it is. But I can definitely say, over the span of my life, and especially these last few years since that suicide attempt, that God's been faithful. That in the end, I've always seen him come through, even if in specific situations at the time I didn't feel like God was near. He always was.
I think everyone's journey. I'm glad you mentioned that because I think everyone's journey is very personal to themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, this journey of all journeys, and I think the mistake that sometimes we can make is we compare. It's exactly like pageants. Funnily enough, we compare our journey to other people's, and when you see other people saying, "Oh, I believe this," and I thank God for this, and sometimes you feel like, "Oh, my faith isn't as strong as yours, so
Right.
there must be something wrong," and that's very dangerous and it's very hurtful because I think everyone's journey is deeply personal to them, and
Yeah,
some people take longer, and for some other people
absolutely.
it's a lot faster. When how did you after all this,
Mhm.
how did you end up in a pageant?
Yeah. So it's so funny too because I had never. People always ask me like, "Oh, did you do pants when you were little?" And I'm like, "Absolutely not." It was never on my radar. And that's how I really felt like it was a God thing. Is like I had never even thought of pageants. Obviously, I grew up with parents who were police officers, and then I was a firefighter, so it just was very opposite from what I had
Yeah.
grown up with or what the world that I was in. And I really just, I don't know how, but it just kind of came to me. Like I kind of was like, oh, I saw a girl that had competed in a pageant like post something. I'm like, oh, that's interesting, and I started looking into pageants, and then it was like each step of the way, I met someone else. I made a new connection, and it just kind of confirmed. I was like, okay, I think this is really something that I should do. And it just was an amazing experience for me, especially because I had worked in a profession that constantly told me to hide, being a woman. Don't
Yeah.
wear makeup. Don't, express your femininity in any way. And so to be able to kind of go into something that wanted to celebrate that, to
Mm.
celebrate womanhood, was really healing for me and something really special. And probably what I love most about pageants is that it gives women the chance to share their story and to celebrate, what they've overcome and who they are, because those are things that should be celebrated. So it was really, that's why I always say it was kind of like a godsend for me because it was never on my radar until all of a sudden it just kind of like appeared.
If you had gone into law enforcement, it'd almost be like you're literally living out miscongeniality because you'd
I
be
know.
that.
I love
Uh,
that movie
I,
too.
I don't know that ever crossed your mind, but it could literally be, Sandra Bullock
Yeah,
going undercover at a pageant.
right.
What did pageantry help you with in terms of your emotional journey?
Confidence is probably the biggest thing.
Yeah.
I was so insecure. I and felt like I didn't have a voice, and so pageantry taught me how to have confidence and helped me so much with just security and who I am. And that's something that I think I learned like through pageantry was, not to compare to other women. And that's one of the things that people really struggle with in pageants is comparing themselves. But like
Yeah.
I remember this, like being at a pageant orientation for the first time and like looking around the room, and it was like I'm in a room of beautiful, accomplished, successful women, but at the same time, that doesn't take away from my own success or beauty or accomplishment. And that was a really big lesson for me is that like we have each other to uplift, and we can all be successful, beautiful, accomplished women. And that's really when we thrive as women, is when we do that. And so yeah, it was great. And also I had really never had any like female friendships because I had
Yeah.
been kind of surrounded, by the fire department, and going through the fire academy and paramedic school was always men. So that was also great and something that I learned too. Like, oh my gosh, it's kind of fun to have some girlfriends that I can talk about stuff with. And yeah, so it was a really great experience.
Did it almost feel like you needed to learn how to speak and behave around women? Because it sounds like you had lived around men and very toxic men for so long. You'd be like, hang on, what are these strange beings who go around
Yeah,
and have done their hair up and don't burp and fart and want to haze
right,
me all the time?
right.
Did you feel like it's like, hang on, I'm one of you guys?
Absolutely. Yeah, there was. It was like a moment of like, oh my gosh, this is actually kind of nice. And yeah, it helped bring a lot of balance, I think, into my life. And we all need that. We all need balance and to cultivate relationships that give us life, that are life bringing relationships. And that's a lot of, my pageant friendships that I found through pageantry is that um they inspire me, and they want me to become a better person. And that's what's really great about, I feel like, pageant girls is that they all are tough. I will always say the toughest people I've ever met in my life have all been at pageants. They haven't been at the firehouse. They are some of the toughest, strongest, just high achieving people that I've ever met. And so it inspires and pushes me to also want to do better.
You did you get nervous at all when it was time on stage or during interview? I mean, you've been through so much. I almost feel like, well, after surviving what you went through, a pageant couldn't phase you, but that's not always the case. So I just want to, like, the first time you took the stage or the first time you sat down for that interview, did any of it kind of phase you?
For sure. The first time, I was so nervous, for sure. I remember thinking, like, everyone, like, the Fire Academy wasn't nothing compared to this. Like this is way harder. This is way more demanding. And I still think that, like, by far, if I had to compare the two, after a pageant weekend, I am more exhausted and sore than I am if I fought a fire. So, it definitely is so much harder than people think. And I really was nervous. And then obviously, as time goes on, as I've competed more, I kind of got more comfortable within myself. And that's my biggest thing that I tell people. If you want to find that confidence, become comfortable with yourself,
Yeah.
become secure in who you are and what you're passionate about. And then it just becomes easy to share that on stage or in an interview.
I think the thing is, something like fire training or training to fight a fire, it's very physically demanding, and sure, you have to face a fear of fire. But I think what pageants make you confront, and this is a lot scarier, is the demons you have inside yourself.
Yeah.
And that exact feeling that, no, I'm not enough and I'm not perfect. And you have to face that. And I think if you're any sort of like a conscious person, that's a lot scarier. Most people would rather fight a fire or run 100 miles than
Exactly.
face the feeling of inadequacy
Yeah.
and facing the fact that we're all deeply flawed at the end of the day. So
Right.
I think, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that why you found it so confronting?
I think so. Yeah. It brings to the surface, any insecurity you have,
Yeah.
anything like that, it brings it to the surface. And so it takes a really mentally tough person to be able to confront that. And also like unique thing about pageantry is that statistically speaking, right? Um, you're probably going to, like, there's a good chance that it will end in a loss versus winning, it winning. it's
Yeah.
it's only that one person who gets crowned. And so I think it takes a really amazing person to say, hey, you know what, there's a much larger percentage that I'm going to lose this and technically quote unquote fail than have this, end with a crown. And
Yeah.
to still say, you know what, I'm still going to go out there, I'm still going to do my best, I'm going to compete, is, I think, such a challenging thing, and takes a
Mm.
really tough person to know that they could absolutely be heartbroken, but they're still going to do this no matter what.
I was interviewing an actress who just gotten herself onto Netflix, and I was just saying, like, I think actors, actresses, you one thing you have to learn is it's either win or learn. There's
Yeah.
no such thing as a loss, because I don't know what the odds are in Hollywood of making it. But
Right.
as you said, in pageants, like, if you're competing with 20, 30, 40 other women, only one of you at the day is going to walk away with a crown. But I don't see that as winning or losing.
Right.
But I think it's so important to learn how to deal with that quote unquote failure, because it
Yeah.
applies to everything in life. And I think if you can take 9, 10, 20, 50, 100 losses in a row, that sets you up for success eventually, because you learn not to become afraid of failure.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think too, getting over that fear of, quote unquote rejection. And I don't,
Yeah.
I don't ever see that, like, oh, if I don't win the crown, then I've been rejected or fail. There's always, you've won something by just going out there and
Yeah.
competing no matter what. But it does, if that's a real fear for you, that somebody may not like you or may not think you're the best, which that is a fear for a lot of people, then
Yeah.
you really have to confront that when it comes to pageants. And, I think that just helps you so much in life, no matter what, because there's always going to be somebody that doesn't think you're the best or doesn't like you, and you have to be confident enough within yourself to say, that's okay.
I think having life perspective and life experience helps a lot as well. And obviously, I often say you don't judge people who have the deepest character. It's a deep character because they've been through something pretty horrific.
Yeah.
There's always a reason for it. And some people can get to 50, 60, 80 years old and not have lived life.
Right.
I don't know specifically how old you are, but I think you've lived more than than most people ever should. But I think that perspective really helps you when it comes to pageantry, because people get fazed by these difficult questions. And I'm like, well, actually, no, I don't get fazed by that, because I think those difficult questions, if you've been through a really tough life as you have the life experience and the wisdom to be able to handle that with some grace. Whereas, I mean, I don't know if you ever thought about this, but you said, I think you were 18 or not, you got into the emergency services very young. Mm-hmm. I don't know how that version of you would have dealt with pageantry, but it must have been somewhat different.
So very different. So very different. I definitely would not have been nearly as confident or secure in myself, or brave, really, to go out and compete in a pageant. So it's definitely shaped me. And, it's funny because I think both of those areas of my life, pageants and firefighting, like, they've both helped each other so much. And that's one of the most beautiful things about pageantry, is that it can feed into so many other areas of your life, and other areas of your life can feed into pageantry and make you a better person in each of those fields.
Where do you see yourself in a year's time, a couple of years' time, 5 years' time? I don't know how far ahead you look. I tend not to look too far ahead. But I mean, you've gone through so much, and I'm sure you have a voice that you want to use. So I'm just curious, how do you want to use it? Where do you see yourself?
Yeah, so I published my first book in April of this year, and that was just a huge milestone for me, and poured my heart out into that book, and really made me realize that I love that side of things as well. So I am writing a second book, so that's probably my next biggest thing. And one of the most beautiful things I think pageantry taught me was, if you would have said 5 years before I competed in that pageant, I would have never said that competing in a pageant was on my radar for my future. And so it's made me open to constantly, exploring different things, finding new passions in life. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, with always kind of keeping opportunities and different things open, because that's how pageantry kind of fell into my lap, was by doing that. So just keeping that openness. And, I definitely know that I think that my story needs to be shared, and I want to keep vocalizing those things, because I do think that it's important for people to know they're not alone in whatever they're facing. And one of the things I always like to say is struggle is universal. Your struggle is probably different than my struggle, but we all struggle. And so that's why I think it's so important for us to share how we overcome those struggles, because it ultimately will help somebody, walk through their own. So that's something I want to continue to do, is to keep speaking out, and to keep just trying to be an example. Recently I endured a horrible injury. I very severely broke my ankle. I've had to have, I had to have 2 reconstructive surgeries over the course of the year. So I've been out of the fire service for about a year, because I haven't been physically able. But that is a door that has recently kind of opened for me, and something I think I'm going to walk back through. And so now I feel like more than ever, I have the opportunity to really make change,
Yeah.
because I am fearless in a sense now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've endured, I feel like, the worst when it comes to that. And so I feel just more prepared and ready than ever to kind of tackle all those cultural issues, because I think it's important. I, if I have a daughter someday, I want
Yeah.
to be able to look at my daughter and without a doubt say, you know what, I did everything I could to make this a better
Mm.
place for you. And so I think that's important. And that's something that I do feel is a task that I've been kind of given, and something I'm going to keep working towards.
You've just overcome struggle. I think you've confronted evil
Mhm.
in one of its purest forms. I don't think there are many people who could go through what you went through and then willingly go to fight it again. Most people are like, once is enough. I'm not going to chance it.
Right.
But I mean, what you described, as I said, it just seems like pure evil, like humanity at its worst. And so, good luck with that. But I can certainly understand that, if you do have a daughter someday, you want to be able to say, I face this down. And so maybe you can deal with not having the latest iPod or iPhone, maybe that's not such a big trauma.
Right.
I do think that that's part of the blessing. Are you able to tell us more about the books you've been writing? Just because I've literally been finishing up the manuscript for my own book here,
Oh,
The
awesome.
Beginner's Guide to
Yes.
Pageantry. This is a very rough draft, and I was writing it. It's like, I think it'd be pretty short, be pretty simple. And like 300 pages later, I've also lost the gift of eyesight. I can't see anymore because I've been so locked in front of the computer. I have another friend who writes books, and she's like, I got my first pair of glasses. We're all going blind.
Yes.
But it's something that you really don't. I love writing, but sitting in front of it, and then at some point, like 2 a.m., and I'm still writing, and it's pretty lonely and pretty difficult at times.
It is.
But can you
It's
tell us
grueling.
more about your author journey?
Yeah. It's so funny because it had been something that had always been in the back of my mind. I'd always liked writing, but it is so daunting. The idea of like, let me just sit down and write a book, like it's so daunting. And so that kept me from doing that for the longest time. And then, I got to a point where I was like, I just have to start. And I do think that that is one of the hardest things when it comes to writing is just starting, like just putting words down.
Yeah,
And then you kind of go from there. And so I wrote my first book. I kind of like I started writing, and it was like it just kind of like poured out of me. I think I finished the first manuscript after like 3 months.
yeah.
So I just typed and typed away. And so it is a really rewarding journey as well. Kind of finishing a book and having that final product in your hand is an amazing feeling. So my first book is To You. It's a devotional book that I wrote, and it focuses a lot on my faith journey. And I wrote it
Mm,
with the idea, so it's to you, as if I was writing a letter to somebody. And I wrote it as if, for me and what I experienced, like if I could have had letters to read from somebody who had walked through what I was walking through would help me so much. So that's kind of who I wrote it for, was with, a young woman in mind who was going through those struggles. And so I finished that in April. And then this next book that I'm writing is just going to be my story. I haven't actually ever, from beginning to end, just wrote about everything that I've endured and in my journey. And so that's been a challenging thing to write for sure, therapeutic in a lot of ways, but also challenging to have to kind of revisit those
yeah,
things.
yeah.
But just writing out my story. And so it's been exciting. And yeah, I'm excited for it.
Oh, how do you begin to structure this second book that you're writing? I mean, there's so many different angles, so many different topic areas. How far back do you go? Into how much detail do you go? Do you just start writing, or do you have a bit of a structure beforehand?
I always kind of go in with like at least a rough outline. So it's going to
Yeah,
focus a lot on my journey through the fire service, and kind of up to present day. And so that's kind of where it focuses on. But I always tell people like to just start writing. Like
yeah,
I think a lot of like writer's block comes from like perfectionism and wanting it to be
yeah.
perfect when you write it out, and that can really keep you from being able to write. So kind of throw out the idea that it's going to have to be perfect because you're probably going to edit it and change it 6,000 times. Yeah, but the most important thing is just to start writing. And so that's kind of where I started with it. And that's helped me a lot, is just to start putting words on paper and then worry about perfecting it later.
I was told by a fellow author that when you're first writing it, when you're putting that pen to paper, so to speak, not that I can write anymore, it's all typed, but he specifically, he wouldn't allow himself to edit
Yeah.
anything until
Yes.
he had the first manuscript, because he said, and he was so right on this, he said, otherwise you'd write that first page 5,000 times.
Yes.
And after, spending a year writing, people go, oh, how's that book going? It's like, oh, yeah, I've got the first page.
Right.
And like, what, a year and you've only got a page? Like, you don't understand.
Yeah.
I've written 5,000 pages. I've just written that same page
Over
5,000
and over.
times.
Yeah.
And it's a journey. I will say that. I mean, I'm very thankful that, I've gotten to the point now where I'm editing.
Hmm.
And there isn't anything quite like the feeling, I think, of getting that first physical copy of the book in your hands. I
Yeah,
like physical
me too.
copies
Yeah,
more
same.
so than the ebooks. I don't think the ebooks do it for me. I mean, I could talk to you for so long. You've got such an amazing story. Just before we go to the final 10 questions, I need to ask you about cats. Um, because as we're speaking, I can hear the neighbor. I befriended a neighborhood cat. He's a lovely
Oh,
Russian
yes.
blue, and he
Oh,
came around and like, he's such a lovely cat. I want you to be my friend. So I'd start feeding him.
yeah.
And then you can probably see where this goes. Now he's
Yeah.
turning up every day, and I can hear him
No.
dingling outside, and he's scratching out the window saying, hey, you haven't fed me yet. And I'm like, you have your own owners. You're not getting stuff to do. But talk to me about like cats and how you bond with them. Because to me,
Yeah.
a lot of people love dogs, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't mind dogs, and I think it's more an individual thing. It's like
Yeah.
not every dog is the same. But for me, I've always enjoyed cats because every cat seems to have its own personality,
Yes, they
what they
do.
love, what they hate, and you kind of got to get to know them. It's a bit more
Yeah.
challenging to become a friend with a cat. So can I just like this is a very random question, but talk to me about cats.
Yeah. No, I heard something the other day and I thought it was so true. It was like people who don't like cats are just people who don't like boundaries. And I was like, that's so true when it comes to cats. It's funny because I always grew up with dogs, like dogs, kind of, I always I like all animals, but
Yeah.
never had cats growing up, so never really considered myself like a cat person.
Yeah.
And then Louie, poor little Louie, he showed up at my grandmother's house. They found him in a bush he looked like a little ball of dryer lint. He was only like 2 weeks old. They don't know how he was alone, didn't have any other kittens with him, nothing. So of course I was like, oh, I'll take him in, and that's when it started for me. After that, I became a certified crazy cat lady. Now I love cats. I think they're amazing. I tell people, I'm like, you have to get a cat. Like, you don't understand until you get a cat, and then it will make sense to you why they're so amazing.
It's spot on when you mention about the boundaries thing. I
Yep.
think someone else language it as it's about consent. Like
Right,
with a
right,
dog, they're just always happy to see you. You don't need
right.
consent. With a cat, if you do something it doesn't like, you're
They'll
going to
let you
get
know.
smacked, bit,
Yeah.
scratched, all of the above.
Yes.
And for me, I don't know. I just find cats much more not better, but I find them much more interesting. Maybe
Yeah.
it's my twisted head. I don't know, but it's like you need to get to know a cat, and I
Yeah.
really like that challenge. Like the cat outside, he doesn't like being petted. You can't pick him up, but he
Right.
loves food. Whereas
Right.
my cat, he doesn't care about food, but he loves
Yeah.
being carried and then having his butt slapped. I never understand that one. And
Yeah.
and
That's
so
how
I,
cats
I
are. It's so fun, and I love that too. Like both of my cats have very distinct
yeah.
personalities, and that is always fun, kind of learning those things. And they'll let you know, like Louis,
Oh yeah.
obviously does not like being brushed, and he let me know when I tried to brush him for the first time. So
And he ended up wrapped up like a
yeah,
burrito. So
he
it
got
didn't.
burritoed. So
The thing is, I have to say that I don't think he would have learned his lesson though. I
yeah,
reckon next time you go for a brush, he's going to do exactly the same. You're going to have to wrap
absolutely.
him up in a towel all the time.
Yes.
Oh, poor Louis. Morgan, just before we get to the final 10, is there anyone that you would like to just say thank you to or give a shout out to for supporting you along your journey so far?
Yeah, my parents. I always bring up my parents. I am blessed to have such supportive parents. My mom was a police officer. It's not like she ever knew anything about pageants, but my goodness, she has been there. She came with me to every appearance I had, every gown fitting. She was just my biggest cheerleader through that. So I'm so thankful for her for that. And then I always talk about my coach, Ryan. She's been great for me, and has helped foster that sense of confidence within me. So I'm just really thankful for that. But, I'm just blessed to have such a supportive family. And no matter what I do, I always say from firefighting to pageants to writing books, they are by far my biggest cheerleaders. And I have just appreciated all they've done for me throughout the years.
You ever competed in a pageant that had a talent section?
I have not. So, and that is something that I am currently looking into. So that will be a journey for me. So I was a gymnast growing up. That was the sport I did, and I actually got to a pretty high level in gymnastics. That being said, I don't think I've backflipped in quite a few years. So I don't know if I still have that in me. I don't sing. I cannot sing. I did play the clarinet growing up, so I do have that. But that's funny you bring that up because that is something I have started to look into a couple systems that have that talent component.
Did you break your ankle? You weren't practicing gymnastics, were you?
No, no, I was not. I was running. I unfortunately was running at night. I don't recommend that to anyone. I did not see a big pothole in the road, and fell into the pothole. Yes, it was game over after that.
I have this thing against running, and it's partly because I get bored, but I'm quite tall. My
Mm,
eyesight's not the best, and for me, I'm either got to run early in the morning or late at night when you
yeah,
can't really see. And I always
yeah,
say the reason I hate running, and people laugh at me and think I'm exaggerating, it's like I either look up and I will run into a pothole, or
yeah.
I look down and I run into trees.
Into something.
This,
Yeah,
this is the
exactly.
this is why I
It just doesn't work
don't.
out.
The reason I asked you about talent section was that I don't know. I have this thing going on in my head, like what would be the most interesting talent? And given that you're a firefighter, I was thinking you could light the stage on, have a fire on stage, and then show people how to put it out.
There you go. I don't know if they would allow that, but it would be cool.
Well, I mean, it'd probably be against the code, right? But I was just thinking,
Right,
oh, it'd
right.
be so cool watching someone put out a fire. Anyway, before I get too carried away, let's go through these final 10 pageant-esque questions. So, number one, what is your favorite word?
Radiant. That is my favorite word. And it's funny, I every year I pick a word of the year. And I always feel it's so funny because I feel like it's a godsend to me. Like whatever word I pick, somehow just that year, by the end of the year, like that word comes to fulfillment in some way. This year's word is redeemed. But radiant was one of the first words that I picked. And it's something, it's just such a unique word. And that to me is like I feel like the biggest compliment anyone can give me is that I'm radiant. And it's something I try to I strive to be no matter what I'm in
Yeah.
is to be a light.
Yeah. I think radiance, it's like beauty. It's not, it comes from the inside. It's not
Yeah,
pretty, it's different.
yeah.
I really love that word. Number two, what is your least favorite word?
Oh, that's a great question. Moist. I don't like it. I absolutely hate it. Please use another word to describe something. It just is one of those ones that like ugh gives me the ick.
Okay. So that answer is very common. So now I need to respond with my response to that, which is, how do you describe a delicious chocolate cake?
Decadent, rich. I guess it doesn't. Those things aren't texture words. I would maybe say
You're not
soft.
going to describe it as wet. Oh, what a
No, because
delicious
that's not
wet.
very appetizing. I have gotten that question before. Like, how do you describe a cupcake or something? And it's
Yeah.
I'm like anything. Just don't talk about the texture. Talk about the flavor. Anything else but the texture.
Okay, so we're definitely not going there then. All right, number three, in life, what gets you excited or what turns you on?
I would say new things. I love, like I said, discovering new passions. I am always one to want to start a fitness journey or start something new, start a new project. When I had my ankle surgery, I decided I wanted to try to pick up sewing and crocheting. And those things just, I think, inspire me and motivate me. So that's why I always try to, find new things to try. And you never know. Some things click, some things don't. I'm not good at crocheting, that turns out. I learned that recently, but that's okay because I can just try something new. So I would say that.
What turns you off?
Um, Inauthenticity, I think, is a huge thing. I think now more than ever in this world, we need people who aren't afraid to just be themselves.
Yeah.
I think that is when you honestly can be the happiest. I know that's when I'm the happiest is when I am not trying to be something or someone that I'm not. I'm just being true to who I am and true to what who I've been made to be.
What sound or noise do you love?
My cat purring. That's the best sound in the world. Yeah, I definitely would not have said that before I got cats, but whenever my cat, he has his nightly routine. He makes biscuits. on the bed before he goes to sleep, and he's just as happy as a clam, and it's the cutest thing in the world, and he's purring so loud when he does it. It's just the best sound.
Like we could just have a separate interview about cats. I will pick up my cat, put him on my shoulder, and he'll start purring. And then I
Aw.
just literally put my ear on him so I can hear it. And it's just the most soothing sound. But can I ask you, so your cats have a nighttime routine? Because I thought this was so
Yeah.
weird. Every about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, which at this moment, because I'm writing the book and I'm up to all hours of the morning, he will come in and just start yelling at me. And I always thought, why? Like, what? What's wrong? I fed you, and then he's like, man. It's like, oh, he wants me to go to bed,
Yeah, he's
and
like,
he
come
won't
on now.
leave me
It's
alone
bedtime.
because I sleep upstairs, and he'll take me up, and he'll sit in front of my door, and then he won't leave me alone until I've gone in. And I'm like, hang on, what are you insisting on putting me to sleep? And then I found a TikTok where someone said, yes, cats are very routine oriented,
They are.
and the last
Yeah.
thing before they go to bed is they need to make sure that you've gone to bed as well. So
Yeah.
does your cat have like a routine as well?
He does. Yeah. No, he definitely does his little nighttime routine with his making biscuits. He makes sure that I'm in bed. He won't sleep. Yeah, he won't sleep until I'm tucked in bed.
Yeah.
So he's very, yeah, he thinks he's probably the parent, and yeah, I'm the child in that relationship. But
Yeah.
yeah, he definitely tucks me in.
It's so weird. People say cats are so independent and they don't care about you. It's like my cat won't sleep until
Yeah.
he's seen me go to sleep. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think my cat cares about me. Maybe he's OCD. Who knows? Anyway, number 6. What sound or noise do you hate?
That's a good one. I don't like, I mean, this is a common one too, but for a good reason. When you're eating on a plate and the fork scratches the plate, that sound is terrible. That like screeching sound. Ugh, it's terrible.
If you could have any one superpower, what would you pick and why?
I've always said invisibility, which I think that like kind of throws people off. And I think it would be amazing to sometimes you're just having a day, you know? Sometimes you're like, man, I just wish I could just tap out and just go invisible. I've definitely had those days. So I think it would be really calming, and probably pretty entertaining too, to have invisibility.
I think the people who answer with invisibility were the mischievous child, the
I definitely
mischievous
was.
children. Yeah. Because you're like, oh, I can play all sorts of pranks and I can eavesdrop on this
Yeah,
conversation. Like, you were one of those children,
I
weren't
was
you? Always the
for
ones that,
sure.
yeah. There you go, 100%. Number 8, what job other than your own would you most like to attempt?
Mm. I always say being a pilot. No rhyme or reason other than I think it's just really cool to fly planes. And I think it'd be cool to say, you know, I've learned how to drive a fire truck, and now I can fly a plane. So, yeah, for sure, I would say being a pilot. And I guess I'm probably a little bit of an adrenaline junkie. Definitely that's what attracted me to the fire service as well as that adrenaline. So I think kind of being a pilot is a little bit similar to that.
I've flown a plane, I think, 3
Oh,
times,
wow.
and also flown a helicopter once.
Oh, wow.
They're both amazing. I don't
Yeah.
like flying, as in being a passenger. I can't
Yeah.
stand that. But
But if you
flying the
control
plane,
it.
yeah, flying the plane is very cool. But if you want a mind bending experience, go into a helicopter because I think
Yeah.
everyone understands how a plane works. Like that pull back and you feel pull. You don't
Yeah.
get that in a helicopter. You pull back and you don't feel anything. You just start going up.
Oh,
It's like being in an elevator over the world. It's very odd and it's very sensitive. So if you want a mind bending experience, try a helicopter. It's very
that'll be on
different.
my list then.
What job would you definitely not like to attempt?
Being a teacher, I love kids. Hope to someday have kids. Could not work with kids. It's funny. I have worked in healthcare and pediatric settings, so working with little kids, and it's rough. It takes a special person, and I have so much respect for somebody that can work with kids every day. It takes a special mind, definitely a gifting to be able to handle that. But yeah, kids are not my favorite in a work setting.
I used to work as a tennis coach with young kids, and I would tell the parents, that this has made me not want to have my own kids. Was working with yours. It's like the best part of what I do is if I don't like them, I get to give them back at the end of the day. But I think it takes a patience of a saint to work with kids. It really, really does. Yes. They always say yours will be different, and I'm like, I'm sure they will be, but still, you just never know. Final question. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Yes, well done. I've always said that. I want to hear God say, well done. And to know that I lived a life where I fulfilled the things that He placed on my heart to do, and that I ultimately made the world a better place for being in it. So I definitely live my life with the hope that I can hear the word, well done.
Morgan, let's leave it there. We've been on for a while now, and I certainly feel like there's other topics of discussion that we could get into, but thank you so much for your time coming on and your bravery.
Thank you so much.
I'll keep you on the line for just a sec whilst I hang out with the audience, but thanks to everyone for watching or listening.